And I was like, at universities, we're like wimps. We don't want to talk about race. Or we just yell at everybody. And so there has to be a better way. And so I think the book is timely because we feel clueless in many ways. And so we're just excited about an open and honest conversation. Let me introduce our speakers really quickly. Shanterra McBride is from Texas. At the end of the talk, the applause.
Okay.
Right. She's the founder of Marvelous University and the author of Love Your Jiggle, The Girl's Guide to Being Marvelous, which I need to read. And has won a number of awards and is an author, a preacher, a speaker, and a teacher. Rosalind Wiseman is from Colorado. As you know, she's perhaps best known for writing Queen Bees and Wannabes, which was the inspiration for the movie and musical Mean Girls. I got to know Rosalind on a panel at South by Southwest on the future of social and emotional learning. And the whole time I was just thinking, this person understands young people in such a deep and profound way that I don't know why I'm on this panel. I had nothing to add. And so when I heard she had a new book and we had a speaker series, I thought this is a match made in heaven. So what I want to do is let y'all just say something introductory for 5 minutes, and then we're going to surface questions, and we'll get a bunch on the table, 10 to 12 questions, and then we'll spend the rest of our time going through y'all's questions on the very challenging topic about speaking of race. So why don't you give us an introduction to the book and how it came to be, and some themes, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay.
Great.
So first of all, hi, and thank you for having us. And hello to Muslim, because I see no background. Okay. And so gosh, Ross and I met back in the 90s, so that's a long time.
Oh, that's what's happening.
Some of us, yes.
I was like, what is it?
Yes,
I was like, I knew I was gonna
that's
see
it. And
imagery.
one, two,
I
yes,
knew it.
yeah.
I was saying cream, and I'm like, got me somewhere.
And so we actually heard about each other before we met one another. And we have a mutual friend who was like, y'all need to meet and y'all are gonna know each other for the rest of your lives. We finally met, the friend was right, and ta-da. And I would say in the summer of 2020, when there was a lot going on. And I really think with the pandemic that people had time to sit and see other people not breathing, right? And at that time, I was getting a lot of text messages from well-intentioned white friends. And I say well-intentioned because they really had great intention behind asking me how's my soul and should they send me flowers and can I buy your family dinner? I really wanted to say yes, because sure. But none of that would have fixed anything that was happening. And I remember saying to Ross, you would not believe, because she is the person you can pick up we don't do the pleasantries like, hey, how's your day? How's it? No, if you would not believe what message I just got today, right? And I could say this to her because knowing her for so long, I knew that she would hear me. She would hear my angst. She would hear my anger. She would hear my irritation. She would hear my mental gymnastics about how do I reply, because if I say the wrong thing, then they're not gonna want to be in the fight. So I have to make sure to be not. We did a couple webinars, and then from the webinars, we really were approached to like, y'all need to write a book.
That's how it happened. It's really, I mean, a little bit, we were thinking, I think we were thinking a little bit about writing an article. And then my husband, who edits like everything I do and is very close to Shanterra. And actually, that's an interesting thing to talk about his involvement with these people, actually, it'd be interesting. Yeah. And he said, I mean, you all can write, but you all actually, your gift is speaking. So why don't you think about that? And so we thought, all right, well, we'll do this webinar. And I think 2,000 to 3,000 people showed up from all over the world. And all over, we had really like high presence in the Middle East, for example, and China, which is interesting because it's hard sometimes for them to get access to us. And then after that, there were people from my literary agency who saw us do the webinar and said, would you think about doing a book? And I think for both of us, I know for myself that one of my best and worst qualities is when someone says, hey, will you do this? And I don't necessarily know how to do it, that I usually say yes. And it really is a pro and a con. It really is. But you know, I said, Shanterra, well, do you want to do this? And pretty quickly, because we're in a university, it's funny to do this different, right?
Yeah.
We are specialists in social emotional learning. We are that professionally, and we are constantly practicing it because we both are putting consistently over the last 20, 25 years together, and mostly apart, but a lot together, and put ourselves in situations where we have to practice what we preach. And it's very challenging. And one of the things that I think our relationship has been built on is being very frustrated with something that's happened in our lives and having to process it, having a person to process it with. And so that's also, so we are experts on social emotional learning. We are experts on youth culture and really listening to people and listening to people before we give them advice. So, and I think we're both storytellers. And so we had basically a strategy for how to write a book of this needs to be applicable to people. 20 questions that are asked to us when we're pulled aside. We can unpack what's happening, what we think is going to happen. We can talk about it honestly and disagree and figure that out. And then we both have a very in alignment kind of understanding of what we think are the skills that we need to apply to make it better. And so I think that became pretty quick that we figured out what the structure was going to be, which was very in alignment with how we both work.
Even though we did start with wanting to write how to be an ally.
Oh, that's true.
Right? Like we had a long conversation, like this is the book, because clearly sending me messages is not how to be an ally, right? So we thought, let's write a book about that. But the more we kept writing and going over ideas, like, that's not the book. That's not the book. We are tackling questions that people are afraid to ask, but people really want to know before we can even get to being an ally. People, and I really believe this, that the well-intentioned folks want to say, I'm an ally, I really, really am. And I was like, why? Before you come in with a t-shirt on, you need to think about it, because you have to lose something if you really want to be an ally. And so instead of it being this badge of honor, I'm like, no, I'm an ally. Well, hold on, wait a minute. Let's peel back some layers, and then maybe you'll say, I'm an ally. But people are rushing to that, especially because of social media. Everybody wanted to put the black square, and I was really confused. Do I like it? Do I not? Do I say good job? Do I not? Confusing, right? And because it was like a day where you're supposed to put up this black square on social media to prove that you're an ally. What the crap? Like, and who came up with that? Who decided that this would be proof that you're an ally? So that was the book. But we went back and forth, and they were like, that's not the book. That no. People want to talk about why, or why are Black women so sensitive about their hair, or why, do I have to show up this kind of way, or why am I not invited to all the parties, or what? Like that stuff.
That's a funny chapter.
Why am I not invited to your party? We'll get to it.
So could y'all give us a preview of some of the questions, the 20 questions? And then I want to surface some from the audience too.
Well, so we just talked about that book.
Yeah,
I know, because we're not used to this, right?
Right.
Anybody doubt that she's a preacher? I just was like, well, I was like, here it goes. So questions. So the one that we were just referencing comes later. It's one of the questions where people say, can I talk to you for a second? People are always saying that to both of us. Never is a second. It's always forever. And they're like, yes, I would. Yeah. But so the one that I think is going to be the most helpful, they're the classics. Like, how can I be racist? I'm a nice person. That's like a classic, right? So we have the classics, but we also have the how racist does my family member have to be for me to say something is actually a chapter.
Because that's a real question. People are thinking about that, and we wish there was a buzzer around somebody's head.
They're like, and now,
like, say something now. But because there's no bus, we're sitting there like,
do I do this? I don't know. So that's one. And then like, after that one is like, am I actually going to confront this person? And then, well, then how? Right. So that's, but the one that we were just talking about is, there's another one that's, can I just do my job? That is a story of a Black woman colleague of ours who had the horribly, unfortunately, all too common experience of being manipulated in her job as a token to look good in a situation. And not only did that happen, as she was like actually wanting truth to occur, the white woman in her department started to cry because she felt bad, right? So that whole thing, right? This woman, this colleague of ours is like, can I just do my job? So we have that. But the one that we were just talking about, which I think is sort of funny, is the one of, can I just go to your party? Why can't I go to your party? Why can't I go to your party? So that is, and sometimes we will talk personally about our own stories because we've had experiences working together where we've gotten extremely irritated at each other around these issues. And this was one that actually I didn't get irritated by it, but so we're running this nonprofit. And there's this, correct me if I'm wrong, this amazingly radiant woman somehow starts working with us.
yeah.
Okay. And then all of a sudden I find out that that they're going to this wine club. They have this wine club. Meaning I've not been invited. And I find out she starts talking about this wine club, and I am like, I want to be invited to that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, I don't think like there's like, why I want to be invited to that. And there's nothing wrong with me asking, but for her, she said to me, I'm not inviting you. And I was like,
I was nicer than that.
I was smiling.
I smiled and I said, no, you can't come.
She might have done that. And I don't know. And so I was like, why? And she said, because you're white. And I was like, I'm Jewish. She was like, that doesn't matter. And I was like, really? And she's like, no, this is a thing for like these women and you can't come. And not only that, I had to see pictures of them and
because we're
boats.
Yes. And I mean, it started off with wine and now 20 years later, it's grown,
And they are hosting us on Sunday night.
We're family.
And so it was important. Like at first, I had this moment of just totally being incredulous. Like, why can't I come to this? I want to go. Like, I don't make friends easily. These are like amazing women. I want to be friends with these women. And so I could honestly ask the question. She could honestly say to me, I'm sorry, but you really can't come. And I get to have a moment of like, And then more importantly is the moment of, okay, fair. And then I do, it's like, it's fair. Like, it's fair. And I can deal with that. And my rights are not being destroyed because I don't get to go to this club, right? I mean, like, and I actually could have, and I didn't, and now that I'm saying this out loud, like I could have reached out to any one of those women and had my own individual relationship with them. So really, like, but it really is this thing. So we take these kinds of experiences of what's happened sometimes between us and say, look, like, and you're not going to die if you don't get invited to a group, by the way, when you're in my position, you're not. And
do you get that though? Do you, because I think that's one of our favorite chapters because we don't know if people get that. Like, we don't know if people really understand. It wasn't a no, or definitely not agree. It wasn't a no to Rosalind. It was a no because this is our time to be together. We all worked in DC and we all were pretty much the only Black women, whether we were in nonprofit or corporate, there were attorneys, and so this was our time to not have to perform, to not be on, to not have to watch what we say, to not have to be the subject of the conversation, to just be. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's one of them. I don't know. We have lots of favorite chapters.
Let's get some questions on the,
Yeah.
and then y'all can answer both the questions you just posed and the questions that the group has.
Yep.
So Kyle.
Yeah, you asked the question, so I felt like I wanted to answer. I mean, of course I get it, but I I'm all throughout this whole conversation trying to think about what others are thinking, you know? And so for me, the first thing that comes to mind, which I'm sure none of these people in the audience, because these are wonderful people, but it's, why can't we have our own party then? You know?
Are you talking about what?
White people?
White
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily just white, but you know, for groups that are in the majority in a lot of places,
Yeah.
I think it's frowned upon for them to have exclusive parties or.
I have an answer to that.
Please.
My answer to that is that when your group is the dominant group, and so and there's a constant narrative that is the dominant group's narrative, then the public space for the most part is their space, or right, the dominant group's space.
Yeah.
And so to be able to create a sanctuary for other people to be able to process, to be able to have peace, to be able to do that is really, really important. And I think one of the things that a person that would advocate for that position, my feeling about that is that they have not taken the time, or it's been too difficult for whatever reason, to really understand, to try and understand and try and appreciate and try and educate themselves about the day-to-day experience of people who are not of the dominant and have to and want to, are living in it, existing in it, succeeding in it. One of the things in particular that Shanterra, and this is obviously an intersection of class and race, is that the women that were in this, in this group, are in high positions of power. And so I just believe that I think when someone says, I need to have my rights this way, when you're coming from a dominant group, that it's an opportunity for you to say, why is that so important to me? And really, but not just to rhetorically ask yourself that question, but truly ask yourself the question of, why is this so important to me when my day-to-day is that, right? My day-to-day is that. So why is it so important to me to create that space? But the caveat there is it really needs to be, as we say in the book, a curious question when you actually want to know the answer, instead of a non-curious question, which is to just reinforce what you already think. And you're saying it to other people.
And I mean, I trust me, right? The mental gymnastics of it is real. It is a constant, if I do this, then what will be the consequence? Because of being marginalized. If I don't include, if I don't invite, what would be the consequence? What will they say? What will they then start that I'm not invited in, right? And then it's this idea that, but for example, Wine Club isn't there to exclude anyone. It's really to give what she says, give space, give a sanctuary, give just a chance to breathe. It's not, we are exclusive, but it's not being exclusive to people, but being deliberate and saying, no.
And you know what? Lots of people will say about kids, you know what? A fact of life is not being invited to the party.
Depending on when you grew up, though.
I know. That's a whole thing that I deal with at work with parents, where parents get like outraged, right? When they're not, and then you have these, things on the other side where, schools have to invite every single person to the party. And then it's this whole thing because like the kid, it's just the whole thing, right? So you just have to sort of roll. It's funny when people take positions like that, when sometimes those same people will take the opposite position because of their own investment in maintaining the status quo.
Now is your opportunity for courageous questions. We have an amazing panel. So what are questions that are burning for you that you want to make sure we get answered today?
Hi. Could you talk a little bit about said about the subject of the conversation? Because I know I have been guilty of that, of making some of the subject of the conversation.
Great.
Talk about that a little bit?
Can you also repeat the question?
Sure, being the subject of the conversation. So I said it
I
earlier.
want to acquire all of them and then answer.
Oh.
Oh,
and then
okay.
That way,
You expect me
Wow.
to remember?
no, I will remember.
Okay.
Other
Got it.
questions. So subject of the conversation, number one. Yeah, Kyle.
How do you encourage courage from people of underrepresented groups to kind of voice their opinions and thoughts and all of that.
Yeah, so encouraging members of underrepresented groups. Yeah.
How do you nurture the virtuous curiosity in people and really have good strategies around that?
Yeah. How do you nurture virtuous curiosity and good strategies around that?
As someone who's both a grad student who appears very young and who's teaching her own class, I think a lot about what I can give up and how I can give it up as a person who's teaching like sociology of education. So yeah, what are the ways in which I could think about doing that so that I could be an ally or be worthy of that? I guess.
So yeah. So what do you give up? How do you give it up? Yeah. Great. Other questions?
You mentioned that this conversation of like, how do you engage with family members and when do you engage? I find that I've struggled with that, and I think that that's something I'm curious about. And not only when do you, because I've had a lot of those conversations, when do you decide to stop having them? Is I think something that
Yeah. So question about family members. When do you stop engaging with family members? Yeah. We have a question in the chat, which is extending to conversations about gender nonconformity, and probably intersectionality with race also.
But what's the?
It's just that it question about how it's kind of a tempestuous topic. It's kind of easy for people to ignite
Got it.
arguments.
Yeah, I understand.
Talking about gender.
Yeah, I'm from Colorado, where it's funny, and it's funny, not funny in Colorado, where I do a lot of this work on intersectionality in all different kinds of ways. And in Colorado, there's this thing about, well, at least we're not Texas. And I have said to them so many times, have you been checking out Colorado politics? And it is because Colorado is a very complicated place. All places are complicated and complex. And so it's interesting because I feel like I'm very much I'm from Washington, D.C. I'd spent most of my teaching career in Washington and in urban areas. And then I moved to Colorado, where it was the first time I had actually done work in much more rural areas, and also these enormous suburbs that have been growing up around in cities around the country. So living in Colorado is really complex about those kinds of issues.
The last question from the chat is, how do you break out of a colorblind ideology?
Oh, got it. That's a chapter.
So, okay, I think we have enough to get us one more question.
No? Okay.
Okay, we have enough questions. Take us across the
Well, I
finish line.
can't remember which one.
No,
it is. Like,
I'm
come
on
on
the
now.
last
Okay.
one.
Yeah, like, which
But
one?
I do remember you asked, now you got.
Oh, subject of the conversation.
Subject of the conversation. So it ranges from, did you do something different to your hair? Did you do like, oh my gosh, look at you, and it's look at your new glasses, or oh, you did such a good job. It's this condescending applause thing that happens, like you made a great point in class, and it's just like, chill, just chill. And I know it sounds like it's coming from a place of I'm interested, I'm curious, I want to know. But when you are within my hair, as you are touching it and then saying, did you do something different? You're not curious, you're invading my space, right? So when I say the subject, it's like having to be on and having to present a certain way. It gets exhausting, really, for a person of color. And so that whole thing of, did you do something? Oh, look at your, oh, this or that. And it's under the umbrella of, I'm trying to be inclusive. I'm trying to make sure that you know that we see you. Trust me, we know that we are seen, but we don't always feel like we belong.
What about the group when people are, I don't, because okay. I have an idea.
Okay.
My idea is that you can riff off of is the amount of schools, organizations, things like that, when people of color are asked to be on committees, but they like that, to me feels like there's a connection there. So I wasn't sure if I was sort of checking in with you about that, like what you thought about that. Like, subject of the conversation to me is like, we're gonna default like, oh, can you be on this committee? Can you be on that committee? Can you be on this? Our constantly thinking of you as a Black or brown person, diversity in the group, and that person's like, can I just do my job? And then you worry about if you don't join the group, then you're not being cooperative and you're not being a problem. And so then you join the committee, but you don't really want to, and then you're exhausted. You're doing a million things. So I have seen so many people at schools, universities, and secondary education, and in corporations, but schools in particular, of like, you know, that it feels to me from the outside. So I don't know if it's in alignment or not, but like this constant asking. When a person in a position of privilege asks a person who doesn't have that privilege to contribute to something or what they think about something, this is one of the things that I think that for the most part, white people or dominant race people don't understand, is when they ask a question, what is excuse me, that is so much more of a loaded thing for somebody who does not have as much race privilege, that you feel like you have to answer, right? Because you don't want to be difficult. You feel like you have to join that committee because you don't want to be difficult. And so from the sort of white point of view of like, but we're asking you to be a part of this committee. We're thinking about you. You're the subject of our thoughts, but but the reaction, the response, or how it feels is, I don't have a choice. I have to do this, which is why I see in secondary education so many Black and brown faculty members who are on 4,000 committees and are so exhausted, but don't feel like they can say no. And then they want to take care of they also feel like they need to take care of a lot of kids who are like them in school. So they're just burnt out. So that's what I thought of when you said that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that matches.
Different, but
Yeah, I don't know if that matches or not.
yeah,
That's what I
but
thought.
yeah, I think it's this, again, this idea of we are including you, but we really just need you here so we take the picture for the pamphlet.
That's her now.
Right? But then, or, we're looking around the table and we have more represent, oh, go get her and have him be on that, or have them be on the, so we can take the.
That's what I thought of.
Yeah.
So the follow-up was virtuous curiosity.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
Yeah. I think there is a difference in being curious and
Being obnoxious.
yeah, being obnoxious, being rude, being nosy, being, and so when I can tell when someone is truly curious, like you can tell when someone is curious about something. If it's you feel it, and I'm a feeler person. My intuition has not steered me wrong ever. And so once I finally learned to listen, I pay attention. So when somebody is asking a curious question, because you also feel free to be honest. And you can say yes or no. And so in the book, we talk about when it comes to hair and the amount of times, and I won't speak for the other Black women in the room, but the amount of times that my hair has been touched without my consent. And I know all of you are doing like, what? Yes, it's happened. And the amount of times that I know not to get angry or be upset, because once I express any kind of discomfort, then the other person really, starts to cry. And so my life is in jeopardy. Mine, right? And so there is, if being curious is, oh, your hair is braided today. It wasn't braided yesterday. Yeah. End of conversation. Done. That's it. So because curiosity says, let me get on YouTube. Let me see how this is done. I don't have to spend time at her desk and say, okay, now how do they do, I go to YouTube. Because I'm curious how it's done. What I'm saying? That is so different than most of the experiences. And again, I could be wrong. I could be, but I'm not. Right? So I think there is a way to be. Another example that I'm thinking of right now, I was an assistant principal at a school in Northern California, and I loved my students. Loved. Because they were developing, they were free to make mistakes, they were young people, I loved them. And one day, students and I was over the setting up clubs. So they had to come to me before they started a club. And so one particular day, some students came and they were all white boys. Because there were only 6 Black students, there were maybe 3 per student. Like the fact that I could count the number, it was that few. And so the students came to me and said, Ms. McBride, we're going to start a Popeye's Chicken Club. And they waited on a response from me because stereotypically, Black people like fried chicken. And just for the record, I like fried chicken, right? But stereotypically, that's what, right? And so they were waiting. And I said, oh, well, why not a KFC club? And they were like, and the eye conversations with teenagers, so they looked at each other and I said, y'all think about it. Think about why we need a Popeye's Chicken Club and come back to me tomorrow with your plan written down, because I'm really interested and curious as to why we need this club. They didn't come back. And it wasn't, I had no interest in shaming them. I had no interest in even calling out their behavior. I wanted to see their brains try to figure it out. And so I think there's a way to be curious, a way to be interested, a way to be present without being offensive.
For me, virtuous questions, and in the book, we are really defining the difference between curious questions and non-curious questions. And so curious questions uphold the dignity of people because they see people. There's a recognition of acknowledgement of seeing. And non-curious questions are the opposite. It's the denial of acknowledging someone's experience. And so one of the things that we're really interested in is really putting a light to the words that are used to dismiss and diminish people's experiences or discussion of racism, like woke and like microaggressions. And so for us, it's really taking a step back, for example, with microaggressions and saying, can we just take a step back and acknowledge that when somebody says something that sort of cuts at you all the time, no matter what the topic is, it's obnoxious. Can we just say that? Can we just say that, right? And then can we learn and like through curious questions of, and what those are you really want to know the answer. And you express that, as Shanterra said, in your body language and your tone. And then the other part of curious questions is, and this goes to your question a little bit, is when you are dealing with somebody, and I think this is probably, I hope maybe this is the most helpful thing that we will write, is that when you are interacting with somebody who is tempting you to not ask curious questions, who has a history with you and your family or in a relationship of some kind, who doesn't ask you curious questions, uses it as a way to prove that you're wrong, to demean you, to say, you just don't understand what's happening because you're naive or you're a college student or you're whatever you are, right? Whatever it is that can identify you as, to demean that part of you, which demeans you and demeans the content of the words that you're saying. And so when you're with someone like that, it gets so difficult to be able to keep asking curious questions without also coming across like you're managing someone. Like, well, I hear that you are asking me these hard questions, and that really makes it right. That's not going to work either. So what we're saying is when the curious questions in those moments are like, if you get feedback from someone that you've asked a question that they have a hard time with, then it is incumbent upon you to ask curious questions to yourself, right? Like, why did I ask that way? Or what was going on with me when I asked that question to Shanterra, for example? But if I'm interacting with somebody who's demeaning me, then the curious question is something like, then this is what we have, is that, these are the prompts, is some things like, look, this is really important to you. The way that whatever you're telling me is clearly really important to you. And I want to understand why. Do you want to explain that to me? And then when they're done, and they'll eventually be done with their 400 things and their points and whatever, is you can say, okay, so are you interested? Are you interested in hearing my point of view? If they're not, walk away. Right? I mean, there's always going to be another day to continue to try again, right? Like, and there is that moment of self-care, like, and it's not going to go well. So, because these things are always invitations. They always have to be invitations, or it is putting up, it's invitations, and then sometimes it's personal boundaries, because you do need to take care of yourself. But it's really like, so help me understand the way you look at the world. And the way we define listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear, which does not mean agree. It doesn't mean agree. It means that you are sitting with somebody saying, what is their story that they've come to this conclusion, and that you are actually curious about it, which does not take away from, if they are taking away someone's dignity and stripping someone of their dignity, that is wrong. So we have to parse that. We have to parse that of like, not excusing people's behavior, but having the curiosity to figure out, how did we get here?
So we have a comment from the chat, and I think it's a response to the idea that there's ambiguity when someone asks a question that could come across as like creating a tax or a burden, like a hair question, and then there's an assumption about where that question was coming from. And so it seems like the core issue is really respect and dignity, that I think that a lot of questions come across in ways that rob someone from a minoritized group of respect and dignity. And people are afraid to even ever ask a question because they're worried that their intentions are going to be misinterpreted and they're going to be shamed and blamed, and because that's what happens on social media. So I'm not sure if I'm perfectly capturing Robert's comment, but I want to give voice to kind of contentious. And I think certainly a lot of people were just afraid to say anything. And so they're worried to be like, if I ask this question wrong, they're going to say I'm a racist. And then,
Right.
So can you just speak to like the listening and respecting on how that works? Yeah.
So so basis of my work for a long time has been about the difference between respect and dignity. So respect in Western culture is really actually the definition of it. Its working definition is about power. It's about who has more power than another person. So respect in Latin means to look back at someone's achievements and admire them. So it's not just about the position they hold, it's about how they have achieved them. So when people say, or particularly young people say, you have to earn my respect to get my respect, and adults get like, what is this, culture, this youth, all that stuff, right? They're right. Because here's the thing. This is about giving respect, and the definition of respect is actual proper due. Because we all were raised with respect our elders, right? Which includes our parents, our grandparents, people in our family, our teachers, law enforcement, political leaders, faith people. You are in a position of respect. And so what happens in our culture is that no matter how that person acts in that position, which includes taking somebody else's dignity away and abusing power, the position gives them the immunity to act however they want. And so we often will focus on the position of respect, which silences us. And literally people who are in those positions who abuse power will use those positions of respect. And they know that people will be silenced, that people who have less power and less authority, i.e. respect in our society, in our culture, won't say anything because if you do, then things collude against you. You are silenced. And you are ostracized, you are alienated, you are marginalized, you are silenced. So the position of respect, we have tremendous requirements, I think. We believe that we are due respect for the work that we do with young people. When she walks into a room, when I walk into a room with a group of young people, or with parents, or with whoever, we're like, we have done the work. We have done the work to feel that we can be in front of you all. Absolutely. Right? And that by the way in which we are speaking to you, connecting with you, whatever, that you see that. But every child in this country and every person in this room has probably seen a person in a position of power abuse it and take away the dignity of somebody else by using that position. And so what happens is when we have to show respect to somebody that is doing that, we feel complicit in this power dynamic and in the abuse of power, and we feel like we can't talk about it. Can you imagine how many kids I've talked to with coaches about this? And
families, parents,
religious people.
Yeah.
So when we separate respect connected to the position and say respect is about admiring someone's actions and their position because of it. From dignity, which is essential worth, and you just get it. You can treat somebody with dignity, and it looks similar to treating them with respect, but it does not feel complicit in the power dynamic. It feels totally different. And you can show, it's much easier to show up competently, strongly. There's just this thing that happens when you are operating from a place of dignity, because it takes the power away. It takes that power dynamic away, or it really does a pretty good job of like buffeting you from it. And you can show up in relationships in very different ways. Yeah. So for us, that is the foundation of this book, is that dignity is not negotiable for anyone, and respect has to be earned. And we have to call out that when people are in positions of authority who abuse it, that does not merit respect.
And for me, I really, when I meet a lot of people who are afraid of the R word, they don't want to be called a racist.
Oh, I was gonna say respect.
Right? No, not respect, but they like, I'm a nice person. I'm so, you know, they get all flustered and, you know, I'm like, yeah, but what you just did was racist. But let me say it to you this way. You did not treat that person with dignity. You did not treat that person as a human being. You did not treat that person as and with dignity, right?
You didn't see them.
And you didn't see them, and you didn't care. You didn't care about seeing them. So a lot of people got really nervous, especially because watching, and I will not watch the video. I cannot watch the video. I just won't do it. Of George Floyd's life being taken, right? And because there was an officer, right? Like, but we're supposed to respect the badge, because why do we respect? Because we're supposed to, and can't nobody really tell you why, but it's because. But watching this badge take the life from someone. So I was like, okay, let's not use the R word. George Floyd was not treated with dignity. Is that better? Does that land better? Breonna Taylor was not treated with dignity. Ahmaud Arbery was not treated with dignity. And so when you think about dignity, doesn't have to be earned, you get it because you are, right? And so it's amazing, it's not even amazing, it's people, Black people, Indigenous people, people of color are saying, treat me with dignity.
See me.
That's it. But for some reason, that's such a battle. Well, no, you're asking to be treated with dignity.
Well, and I think that there's no surprise, because our educational system is based on our definition of respect on a compliance model. So this is not actually a surprise at all. This is what our educational system, except for the very minority kids, but really it's really based on, you know, our educational system is based on compliance, and they use the word respect to control kids. And they don't feel that they need to treat young people with dignity. And that's when kids get mad. And that's when kids disengage from academics. It's when they disengage from the teacher. It's when they disengage. It's when they disengage. And so we know this. We just have to put words to it. That's what I really, it's like, we have to put words to it. And I think the thing about the racist versus dignity is that dignity it just always has felt to me that dignity allows you to see when this becomes part of your life and the way that you really are thinking about principles of life. It's an aspirational principle that also grounds you in the moment. It's really powerful. So so principles in this book, when we're talking about principles, guide our thoughts and our actions, and dignity is our foundation. And from there we go to And I would go to listening is being prepared to be changed by what you hear, which does not mean you have to agree. It means that that no one knows everything, but together we know a lot. One that we struggled with a lot in this book is be easy on people and hard on ideas. We struggled, we were about to not actually, I was a principal, like, how do we, to go back to, Thanksgiving around the corner, how do you be easy on your uncle who seems to have been, looking up all the things so that they can show you all the reasons why you're wrong and naive and all those things. And you're like, wow, have you been spending hours doing this, getting ready for this conversation?
I'm ready.
You haven't. And which is a really interesting thing. Why? What is it that and I'm not saying I am fascinated that people would do that. So be easy on people, hard on ideas sounds good. And it's really painful when it comes to issues of degradation of people based on who they are, of race and racism.
It was hard. Y'all will see a whole, I really struggled.
And we almost didn't have it in there.
Yeah, because I really had to sit with, be easy on people, hard on ideas. So be hard on the idea of racism, but easy on the race. I struggle. And you will see that in the book. I really had to sit with it and work with it and really try to figure out, what does this mean for me? And really having conversations with Ross about it, I'm not there. I don't know. It sounds really cute. I could see it when we're dealing with schools and education and bullies and all that kind of stuff. But I really am having a really hard time when it comes to systemic racism. But writing it out and having really hard conversations. And so everything that you'll see in the book, please know, we had to work through it first before it made it to the pages.
Do you know how many times I had to tell her, if you can imagine how this went? She would say, because of systemic racism, right? In the book, she'd just be, because of systemic racism. I would write a comment. Yeah, actually, people don't know what that looks like.
Well,
and she'd be like, she would just, what are you talking about? I'm serious about this. You can't keep using this word as the word that explains all of this to people because they don't know. And we would go back and forth and back and forth. And that was very irritating for her.
So on that, one thing that's powerful about behaviors of dignity versus racism is dignity feels like something everyone can learn and be attuned to and can also intend to do but do poorly.
Yes.
And but it feels like so much of the fear for white people to talk about racism is you feel like a misstep reveals some core essence as a racist. One reason why this fits with Texas Mindset Initiative is there's work on people who believe racism or prejudice is just a fixed trait. You either have it or you don't. And the more you believe that, the farther that you don't sit a chair next to a cross-race interaction partner because you're worried about screwing it up. So I guess how did that evolve? Thinking about the behaviors that we can all learn in good faith, even if we suck at them a lot of times, versus a kind of fight over labels, which it feels like pushback comes apart because of the fight over labels.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, oof. Okay. I'm gonna just so I have a reputation, well earned, frankly, for putting things in labels. And that is a pro and con, right? Because I wrote this whole taxonomy of young people's social dynamics that a lot of people use to this day. And I did not create Queen Bees and Wannabes and Target, whatever, for people to do that. But I feel like labels are things that in one way can inform the way that you show up in the world, right? It's like it gives you more education about how you show up in the world, or it's an identity that fits you right now. And this is my work with young people. But labels can also, they can free you and they can box you in, basically, right? So, but having that conversation with yourself is so incredibly important. And the other thing that for me about this, the dynamics of this, this fear, this shame, this whatever, is that I don't believe it is coddling people to help them prepare to have difficult conversations. I don't think that. I think that, when this goes to creating your question, that social emotional learning is not a program, and it's not a demon that makes children like, I don't even know what, but it is actually at its best. It is teaching young people to understand their emotions, manage their emotions, and then advocate for themselves and listen to other people. That is what social emotional learning is at when it's done well. And so one of the things that we did that we thought was really important is explaining to people basically what emotions are, and then how they work in the brain, and what emotional hijacking is, and regardless of what the issue is, and what boundaries are, and how you speak boundaries. And so giving people the preparation, the skills, the knowledge to be able to do that before they start talking about things that they're bringing all sorts of stuff into their head about, is really, you're setting them up for success. Just like students, we want people to feel a sense of belonging. You want a sense of norms in a classroom. Everyone's treated with dignity. If not, I need to know, because I'm teaching you math, or I'm teaching you psychology, but that is my responsibility to you, no matter what I'm teaching you. So creating a sense of belonging in the classroom is imperative, because people, no matter what their age, will not learn if a sense of belonging does not exist. So when we are teaching, we are showing about emotions, we are showing the consequence of feelings, now your brain responds. And then we're integrating that into how people are responding to race and racism and conversations about that. Then people feel more informed about what's going on in their bodies when they are having that conversation, when they are having these moments of like, I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling vulnerable. I need to have, I know what's happening right now. I'm fast thinking, I'm not slow thinking, because I'm emotionally hijacked, which means I'm going to start making decisions that I'm not really going to think through. Not good. Slow down, right? Like all of these things, that is not coddling people. That is preparing people to be successful in a conversation. And relationships, obviously, and negotiating relationships are the most important thing that we do every day, regardless of what we do. So for me, for us, as we went through the book, we felt like that was the missing ingredient for so many diversity, equity, inclusion conversations, is that people were just being dropped in, and they were bringing their, I would say in Yiddish, it's tsuris, like they were bringing their baggage to this of like, yeah, right? Which means that they literally are not listening, that they sit in that room and they are not, their brains are already on fire. They're already defensive. And so they're not set up to listen. They're not set up to learn. And so as teachers, we felt like as educators constantly focused on how do we get people to take us seriously? Like we worked with teenagers forever.
Yeah.
How do you get these people,
Even though we're young.
how do you get these people to listen to you and think that you have a clue as to what you're saying?
Yeah.
You listen to them. You don't give advice to people until you listen to them first and understand the context in which they're living. That is not coddling. That is understanding how to be an effective educator. So that's what, we feel like that's sort of the overall strategy that we are employing to be able to address a lot of the issues that you're bringing up, and David sort of encapsulated in one.
I love that. Don't give advice until you listen.
It helps. May I add one thing about that? What I would add is, especially as a Black woman living in America, I have had to learn that it's okay for me to stay at the table, right? If I see somebody getting really defensive and getting really uncomfortable, and I see them getting flustered, and I see them getting worried, and I can say, we here. We're gonna have, I'm still in the conversation. Do you still want to have it? Because I'm here. I want to have the conversation. I'm not running away. I know you think I'm gonna run, but I'm here. I'm trying, let's talk. But because in our history of our country, we're not allowed to, we quick to put a label on somebody, and we won't stay at the table. And I'm willing to stay at the table, many people of color are willing to stay at the table, but the shame is sometimes so overwhelming. And that's shame, period. That's what shame does. Shame is gonna shame, right? And it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And so then you have people that financially benefit from the shame. I mean, they are making billions of dollars off. Did you see how they shame you? And they didn't want you there, and they didn't want you to be. They're making money. But if we can say, no, we still in this shame. We're still here. It's tough. It's uncomfortable. We are truly wiggling in our chairs, but we're still here. So let's forget the label. And then I think a lot of times, especially people, white people in, in majority positions, that also means, I gotta work through this. I got some work to do. Apart from that person is not responsible for the work that I need to do. There's some stuff that I saw growing up and forever. This is just the way we did things. This is just how we spoke around the table. We didn't mean any harm. This is just what we did. Oh, I gotta work through that. That probably wasn't. I don't need to tell Shanterra that's what I'm like. My family, this is what we did. And
Right.
Can you imagine the amount of stories that I've heard? No. I don't need to know. Just go through it.
So we're out of time, but there's one final question from Cynthia Unohosa, who's one of our proud graduates, is at Chicago now, does a lot of great work in Chicago around equity, and kind of relates to Kyle's point as well. And it's, how do you just sustain yourself in doing this work? Because it's, the theme is just the tax on working memory, on emotions, of having to feel like a minority group has to educate a majority group, while also being vigilant to threats and things like that. So the closing comments are just really what sustains you with this work going forward.
Yeah, I truly feel, there are two things. One, I feel called, y'all heard I'm a preacher, but I really do. I feel called to do this work. I feel called to be at the table. I know when to step away, right? I know when to say, we can come back, or I can come back, or I know how to take care of myself. So I step away. And the other real reason is because I have a niece who's 2 going on 22. And I really hope by the time she is a student, she's not having to deal with these same conversations. But I also know that my grandmother probably thought the same thing, and my mother thought, whatever. But I will stay in it, because she shouldn't have to convince somebody that she deserves to be treated with dignity. Sustaining, I know when to step back. I know how to take care of me. We gotta take care of us.
I thought you were gonna say wine club, by the way.
Listen, and we are far. We're still based in DC. I live in Texas, but we still we'll get on Zoom. We have a group meeting. Yes.
I would also there's 2 things. One is, I sometimes haven't had a lot of martinis since February, because I was like taking care of myself a little too much on that, because I was so taxed in that way. But I really have felt that if people are not going to like me, I'm going to choose why, and this is what I choose, and that's okay. And then the other part is that I think you can choose however. You don't have, the thing I don't like is when people, this happened, you can choose how that path is for you, because every single path we have, there is a way to create dignity for people in every single thing that we do, whatever path, whatever job, whatever we do. And so my request to you all is, obviously, because they're giving the books, like, please take one and engage with us. But also, if you thought about, it's like preaching to the choir kind of stuff, but you have lots of people in your life that maybe it's appropriate to repair or to reach out to. Maybe it's appropriate to look and see, is it possible for me to employ some of these things with these difficult relationships I have in my life, just to consider it. And that's what we want, is for you to just engage in possible repair and the work with yourself, and then possible repair with other people.
Great. So please join me in thanking our speakers. We're so thrilled to have you.